Hello and welcome to What's in the Night Sky for February 2021. This month we're going to be talking about exciting missions arriving at the planet Mars, the moon just after new, and the constellation of the month, which is Cassiopeia, the Queen. Let's begin by taking a look at the moon, and you can see here that we are looking towards the east in the early evening on the 1st of February, and I'm just going to take us straight to the 11th of February because that is when new moon occurs this month, and I'm going to go back into the daytime to about 3 o'clock. And if we go over to the sun, you should never look at the sun with your naked eye or with any equipment, by the way, then you can see that just below the sun we have the new moon. So no part of the surface of the moon that we can see is illuminated by the sun. And if we just zoom out and watch what happens over the next couple of days, so you can see here that the new moon is very, very close to the sun. And if we just go to the 12th and then the 13th, you can see that the moon has moved away from the sun a little bit and risen a little bit higher. And if we zoom in on it, you'll see that we have a very slender crescent. So this is just the moon at a couple of days old. If you want to try to spot the very, very thin crescent moon 1 or 2 days after new, then the best time to try to do that is around sunset or just after sunset, and you can sweep the sky with your binoculars if you have a pair and see if you can spot this very thin crescent moon. It can be very, very tricky to do that, but quite rewarding if you do manage to spot it. If I just take the sun down now, so you can see we're about 6 o'clock on the 13th. The moon is very low to the horizon, and it can be very tricky to pick it out of that evening twilight, this very, very thin crescent. If we go on by 1 day to the 14th, you can see that the crescent's got a little bit bigger and quite a bit higher, so you'll be able to spot it as the sky is getting much darker, and that makes it a lot easier to find. So we'll zoom in on this 3-day-old crescent moon and see what sorts of things we might be able to see. If you look along the part of the moon that is illuminated by the sun, then you'll see that this sea is just coming into view. The Mare Crisium, or Sea of Crises, is coming into view. If you have a pair of binoculars or a telescope, if you sweep them along this terminator line, the line of the morning terminator between night and day on the moon, you might be able to spot lots and lots of different features. You'll be able to spot craters, you'll be able to spot things within the Sea of Crisis coming into view, such as wrinkle ridges on the floor of the sea. And it's really good to look along the terminator line when you're trying to see these features, because the play of light and shadow exacerbates those features and makes them really look quite fantastic. And as the morning terminator moves away from those features, then they don't appear quite so prominent. Some of those features that you might be able to see along the terminator disappear. The other thing you might like to try and spot on the early crescent moon is earthshine. So we've got this very thin crescent that's illuminated by the sun, but you also might be able to see the rest of the moon, which is illuminated by reflected light from the earth, and we call that earthshine. And if you have a pair of binoculars, you can see if you can spot a blue tinge to the earthshine. The other thing you can do is try and make out some of the other major features, some of these other seas on the moon, just by looking at them through the earthshine. If we go forward by 1 more day to the 15th of February, you can see now that the whole of the Sea of Crises is illuminated, and we're starting to illuminate also the Sea of Fertility and the Langrenus crater. If you have a telescope, you might be able to spot the Langrenus crater along with its terrace walls and central mountain peak as well. We're going to leave the moon behind now, and next month we will pick up again where we've left off, and we'll start to look at the moon from about day 4 or 5 onwards to see what we can see over the next few days. Let's take a look at the planets now. If we zoom out a little bit more, you can see that Mars here is nice and high in the sky in the early evening, so around 7 o'clock here on the 15th, and Mars is in a good position for observing all month. And Mars is quite an exciting planet to observe anyway, but particularly this month because there are 3 missions arriving at Mars all in February. If we let's take a zoom in and have a look at a telescopic view of Mars. So if you do have a small telescope, then you may be able to make out that Mars has a disk. You may be able to make out that the disk is not fully illuminated, showing a gibbous phase, and you might be able to make out some of these lighter and darker patches on the surface of the planet. This month we have 3 missions arriving. So NASA Perseverance is planned to land on Mars on February the 18th. That is going to have a rover and is looking for biosignatures of ancient life at the bottom of a crater. They're chosen because it's a possible site of a dried up ancient lake. Excitingly, the Perseverance mission will also deploy the first ever helicopter to fly on another planet called Ingenuity, and the idea of that helicopter is just to test powered flight on Mars to see how that works. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that goes. The other thing that it's going to do is collect some rocks. So the Perseverance rover will collect rocks for possible collection in the future for a sample return mission where those rocks and soil samples get brought back to Earth to be examined here. The second mission that I want to talk about that is arriving at Mars this month is the UAE HOPE mission, which is due to arrive on February the 9th, and that is going to be an orbiter that's going to study the Martian atmosphere and the Martian weather. And finally, China's Tianwen-1 mission, which is due to arrive on the 10th of February, and that is going to contain an orbiter and a rover, and it's going to spend some time orbiting the planet and studying it before deploying the rover, which is planned to happen in May. And that one has ground penetrating radar, and it's going to investigate the soil characteristics and the water ice distribution on Mars. So 3 really exciting missions which should hopefully further our understanding of the red planet, all arriving in February. If you would like to take a look at Mars alongside some other objects in the night sky this month, then there are a couple of opportunities to do that. On the 18th of February, let's just go forward a few days to the 18th, you can see that the Moon and Mars are quite close together, so you could have a go at exploring these 2 with a pair of binoculars, and the Moon being quite close to Mars as well will help you to find Mars if you are a beginner and you're not sure where to look for it. And also from around the 27th, from the end of the month, in fact you can see it approaching already, Mars and the Pleiades star cluster are going to be quite close together. And the Pleiades is a star cluster otherwise known as the Seven Sisters, which is part of the constellation of Taurus the Bull. And the Pleiades, as I've said before, is probably my favourite binocular object in the night sky. It looks really amazing through binoculars, so if you do have a pair of binoculars, please have a go at finding the Pleiades this month, and if you do it towards the end of the month, you've got Mars in there as a little bonus as well. The other planets this month, Jupiter and Saturn are just emerging from conjunction with the Sun, so they are visible in the very early morning sky along with Venus, but very, very difficult to spot. You need to look for them. If you look for them in the early part of the month, around 20 minutes before sunrise, you might be able to catch a glimpse of them very close to the horizon, but very, very tricky to pick them out of the morning twilight. And the other planet that I want to mention this month is Uranus, because on the 17th of February, if we take a look at the Moon, you can see that Uranus is quite close by. Now Uranus is really hard to spot with the naked eye, but you might be able to use the moon to help you to find it with a pair of binoculars. If you do find it with a pair of binoculars, it will just appear really as a star. It's so faint and so far away that if you want to spot any more detail with Uranus, you are going to need a telescope. If you have a telescope, you might be able to spot that Uranus has a slightly greenish hue to it. And really, February is the last chance to see Uranus before the autumn, because it's going to start to disappear into the evening twilight after February is over. Let's take a look at our constellation of the month now, which is Cassiopeia the Queen. And I'm just going to locate the Big Dipper in Ursa Major. So the Big Dipper is probably the most familiar pattern of stars in the night sky to most people. So if you can locate the Big Dipper, find these two stars on the end of the Big Dipper and draw a line between them and follow them until you reach the next brightish star, which will be the pole star Polaris. So that's a handy way to find the pole star. If you then go back to the Big Dipper, find any of the stars in the Big Dipper's handle, draw a straight line from the star you've chosen through Polaris and keep going, and that will take you to Cassiopeia the Queen, which is a nice W or M shape in the sky depending on when you are observing it. And Cassiopeia is quite an easy constellation to spot. Even if you've got a little bit of light pollution going on, you should still be able to spot Cassiopeia. If you have a pair of binoculars handy while you're observing Cassiopeia, if you find this brightish star on the end of the M or the W calf, and if you just follow this line along, it should bring you to an open cluster known as M52, Messier 52. Let's just see if I keep zooming in. There we are. There is M52. So M52 with a pair of binoculars will appear as a fuzzy patch. You're not going to be able to make out individual stars really with a pair of binoculars, but you will be able to make out that hazy patch that signifies that there's a cluster of stars there. If you have a telescope, probably 4 inches in diameter or larger, then you will be able to see that there is a dense cluster of stars here. So just a nice one for if you have a pair of binoculars or a telescope handy while you're observing Cassiopeia. If we put the art on, you can see that Cassiopeia is depicted as a queen tied to a chair, currently hanging upside down. And in ancient Greek mythology, the story goes that she boasted that she was more beautiful than all the sea nymphs, which angered the god of the sea, Poseidon, who sent a sea monster to ravage the kingdom. And to pacify the monster, Cassiopeia's daughter, the princess Andromeda, was tied to a rock by the sea. And here you can see the constellation of Andromeda depicted in the night sky close to Cassiopeia. You can also see this fuzzy patch here, which is the Andromeda galaxy. So another object you can have a go at with binoculars if you are observing this area of the sky. So Andromeda was left tied to a rock, and the sea monster was about to devour her when Perseus the hero swooped in and saved the day, saved the princess, and they all lived happily ever after. And the gods decided to put all of these characters into the heavens as stars. Cassiopeia was bound to suffer the indignity of spending half of her time upside down, tied to a chair, for her vanity that she had shown. And if we speed up time a little bit, I'm just going to zoom out. So we've got Cassiopeia over here, pole star over here, and if we speed up time, you can see how the stars appear all to rotate around the pole star. And if I speed up a little bit more, you can see that Cassiopeia spends half of her time upside down and half of her time the right way up. And the other thing that you might notice is that Cassiopeia never appears to set below the horizon, and that's because the constellation of Cassiopeia is what's known as a circumpolar constellation. So from the UK, it is always visible above the horizon. Finish by taking a look at the International Space Station. As always, you can use NASA's Spot the Station website to find out when the ISS passes are for your location. The one I'm going to show you is on the 1st of February at around 10 to 6 in the evening. So let's go to 10 to 6 on the 1st of February. Let's take the constellation art off, and if I speed up time, let's go to the west. So you need to look to the west to see the ISS coming over, and you can just see it emerging from the west there. So 10 to 6 on the 1st of February, and the ISS will take a few minutes to pass over all the way across the night sky and set again in the east. So that brings us to the end of our night sky tour for February 2021, and I'll be back again next month to talk about what you can see in March.